On a remote rock in the cold North Atlantic, a lighthouse stood watch over some of the most dangerous waters on Earth. Its light never failed. Until one winter night, it did. When help finally arrived, the three men who kept the light were gone. The door was closed. The clocks had stopped, and a chair lay overturned on the floor. There was no sign of a struggle and no sign of the men. The sea had taken them and left no answer behind. This is the mystery of the Flannan Isles. Welcome to Curio Hour, where we uncover the strange, the unsolved, and the unforgettable. Today's story: the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. Off the far northwestern coast of Scotland, beyond the Outer Hebrides, lies a scattering of tiny, windswept islands known as the Flannan Isles. They are little more than jagged rocks rising out of the gray Atlantic. The largest of them is called Eilean Mor, which means simply the Big Island. For centuries, no one lived there at all. Sailors believed the islands were haunted, and shepherds who left their sheep to graze refused to stay overnight. But the waters around the Flannans were deadly. Ships passing between the islands and the open ocean were wrecked again and again on the hidden rocks. So in 1895, work began on a lighthouse to warn them away. It took 4 years to build. Every stone, every beam, and every barrel of oil had to be hauled up the sheer cliffs by hand. The work was brutal and the sea was merciless. Finally, in December of 1899, the light was lit for the first time. Its beam swept out across the water, visible for miles, a single point of safety in a vast and hostile darkness. To keep the light burning, men were needed. Lighthouse keepers who would live on that lonely rock for weeks at a time, far from their families and the rest of the world. 3 men were assigned to the Flannan Isles light. The principal keeper was James Jucat, an experienced man in his 40s who had served at lighthouses for more than 20 years. With him was Thomas Marshall, a younger second assistant. And the third man was Donald MacArthur, a local fisherman brought in as an occasional keeper, known for his hot temper and his strong arms. The rotation was simple. 3 men stayed on the rock while a 4th waited on shore. Every 2 weeks, a supply boat would arrive to swap 1 man out and bring fresh food and oil. Life on the lighthouse was hard and monotonous. The men trimmed the wicks, polished the great lenses, and wound the clockwork that turned the light. They kept careful logs of the weather every single day. Around them there was only the wind, the crashing of the waves, and the cries of the seabirds. In a storm, the spray could reach the very top of the lighthouse, more than 200 feet above the sea. It was a place that tested a man's nerve. The isolation alone could wear down even the steadiest mind. But these were experienced keepers, and they knew the dangers of the sea well. By December of 1900, the light had been burning faithfully for a year. The 3 men, Jucat, Marshall, and MacArthur, were on the rock together, going about their duties as the winter closed in. On the 7th of December, a supply boat made its last delivery of the year. The men were well, the light was working, and everything seemed entirely normal. It was the last time anyone would see them alive. 6 days later, on the night of December the 15th, a steamship called the Archdor was passing the Flannan Isles on its way to the port of Leith. The captain looked toward the islands, expecting to see the familiar sweep of the lighthouse beam. But the light was dark. The Flannan Isles lighthouse, which never failed, was not shining. The captain noted it, but a storm was raging, and his radio was broken. He could not report what he had seen until he reached port. And so days slipped by with the light still dark. On the mainland, the relief keeper, a man named Joseph Moore, waited to be taken out to the rock. But the weather was so violent that the relief boat could not sail. Storm after storm battered the coast. The relief had been due on December the 20th, but the sea would not allow it. Christmas came and went, and still the boat could not reach the Flannan Isles. Finally, on the morning of December the 26th, the seas calmed just enough. The Lighthouse tender, a vessel called the Hesperus, set out for the rock with Joseph Moore aboard. As the Hesperus approached, the crew sensed at once that something was wrong. There was no flag flying. No empty supply boxes had been left out on the landing stage, ready to be collected. And there was no one waiting to greet them. Normally, the keepers would have seen the ship coming and gathered at the landing. But the rock was silent and still. The ship sounded its whistle. It fired a flare into the gray sky. There was no response. Nothing moved on the island except the wind and the birds. Joseph Moore was rowed ashore in a small boat. He climbed the long, steep steps up the cliff to the lighthouse, calling out the names of his 3 colleagues. No one answered. He reached the entrance gate. It was closed. He went to the main door of the lighthouse. It too was shut. He opened it and stepped inside into a cold and empty silence. The beds were unmade. The clock on the wall had stopped, its mechanism run down. And the fire in the kitchen had long gone cold. The 3 keepers were nowhere to be found. Terrified, Moore ran back down to the boat and brought up more men to search. Together they went through every room of the lighthouse, top to bottom. The men had simply vanished. The last entry in the logbook had been made on December the 15th, the very day the passing steamer had noticed the light was dark. After that, nothing. 2 sets of oilskins, the heavy waterproof coats the keepers wore, were missing. That meant 2 of the men had gone outside into the weather. But the 3rd man's coat still hung on its hook. It was a chilling detail. It suggested that one of the keepers had rushed outside without his coat in such a hurry that he did not stop to put it on. What could have made him run out into a storm unprotected? The searchers turned their attention to the landing stages, where boats tied up and supplies were unloaded. There were 2, one on the east of the island and one on the west. The eastern landing was undamaged, but the western landing told a different story. There the sea had done terrible things. A box of ropes and tools, kept in a crevice more than 100 feet above the sea, had been torn open and emptied. Iron railings were bent and twisted. A great block of stone weighing over a ton had been moved. Whatever had struck the western landing had come from the sea, and it had been immense. The power needed to throw such weights around, so high above the waterline, was almost unimaginable. Slowly, a picture began to form. It seemed the men had gone down to the western landing, perhaps to secure equipment against a coming storm. And there, something had happened to them. The official investigation was led by Robert Muirhead, who knew all 3 men personally. He pieced together the evidence as carefully as he could. His conclusion was this: the keepers had gone to the western landing to secure a crate and other gear. And while they were there, an enormous wave, a freak of the winter sea, had swept up the rocks and carried them away. It was a plausible theory. The damage to the western landing was real, and the Flannan Isles were known for waves of terrifying size. But it left questions that have never been fully answered. Why would 3 experienced keepers all go down to the dangerous landing together in the middle of a storm? The rules said 1 man should always remain at the lighthouse. So why was no one left behind? And so the theories multiplied. Some pointed to the overturned chair in the kitchen as a sign of sudden panic. Others wondered if 1 keeper had been swept away and the other 2 had died trying to save him. There were darker ideas, too. Some whispered that the isolation had driven one of the men mad, leading to a fight, a murder, and a body thrown into the sea. The temperamental Donald MacArthur was sometimes named in these stories, but there was never a shred of real evidence for any of it. It was only speculation, born of the silence. Stranger still, a popular poem written years later claimed the rescuers found a half-eaten meal and an overturned chair, as if the men had vanished mid-supper. But the official records mention no such meal. Over time, fiction and fact became hopelessly tangled. People added ghostly details, phantom boats, and strange figures glimpsed on the rocks. The true story was buried beneath a century of legend. What we can say for certain is small but haunting. 3 men were alive on a remote rock. The light went dark, and when help finally came, they were gone, leaving behind a closed door and a stopped clock. Their bodies were never found. The sea around the Flannan Isles keeps its secrets, and it never gave the 3 keepers back. The lighthouse still stands today, automated now, its lamp controlled from far away. No keepers live on the rock anymore. But the beam still sweeps the same dark waters that swallowed Jucat, Marshall, and MacArthur. More than a century later, we still do not know what truly happened on that island in December of 1900. The Flannan Isles gave us a perfect mystery, sealed behind a closed door, and they have never let it go.